What if One Piece wasn't about Luffy, but Zoro? Zoro eating the Nika fruit. Zoro wearing the straw hat. Zoro striving to become both the strongest swordsman and king of the pirates. But could he actually do what Luffy did? And how would the story be different when it's our favorite mosshead here building a crew, choosing what islands to go to, and trying to reach Laugh Tale and claim the One Piece? It's a dark and stormy night in the East Blue 16 years ago. Shanks and the Redhead pirates are sailing towards a small island. After having successfully stolen a powerful devil fruit from the world government, they are now ready for the second part of their great master plan, finding the son of Goldie Roger. However, before they get the chance to hit their stride, a burst of light rips open the sky and one large powerful beam of light hits the side of their ship, the Red Force. It leaves a massive hole within the sea that drops all the way down to the ocean floor. The secret king Imu is trying to do everything in their power to stop Shanks from accomplishing his mission. Luckily, being the powerful pirates they are, the Red Hair pirates narrowly managed to dodge it, but now they are massively off course, and trying to escape the Marines still following them, they have to land at a small town known as Shimotsuke Village. And it's here where our story actually begins, on one fateful afternoon where the soon-to-be Emperor of the Sea, red-haired Shanks, meets a young boy with no fear in his heart. Believing that Shanks and his pirates are invaders trying to raid the village, he rushes in to challenge him to a duel with the safety of the island resting on his tiny little shoulders. This young man is none other than Roronoa Zoro, and his dream is to become the world's strongest swordsman. Little does he yet know that he's also destined to become the warrior of liberation, the king of the pirates, and even a literal god. Now, for the most part, Zoro's backstory here starts pretty similar. His best friend was murdered by a staircase, and he loves to chew on swords. But one day, that sword that he loves eating isn't going to cut it, and he feels drawn to a locked treasure chest that Shanks has hidden away on the ship. Once he pops it open, he sees a strange-looking purple fruit that seems to be calling his name. Zoro, Zoro, Zoro. With one big bite, he accidentally changes the world forever. Shanks and Bagman barge in, screaming at him as they hear him freak out over being made of rubber all of a sudden. Truly, the most awful person to eat this fruit has taken it. Zoro quickly figures out how to undo his rubber body and tells Shanks that he doesn't really want these powers to begin with. This isn't going to help him at all becoming a great swordsman. That's right, for this version of the story, Shanks isn't even going to get the chance to give Luffy the mythical Nika fruit because Zoro eating the fruit and the world government hunting him isn't giving him any other choice but staying on the island. He's now forced to make his new home base Zoro's village, and instead of inspiring Luffy to chase his dreams, he's going to end up helping Zoro achieve his. But there's just one slight problem with this, because unlike the son of Goldie Roger or Luffy, this kid doesn't even want to be a pirate. Zoro couldn't care less about helping other people, and he's so stubborn it's not even funny really. Not to mention that he takes everything way too seriously. This kid has about as much fun as a piece of stale bread. So how on earth is Shanks going to convince this kid to sail the seas and eventually become Joy Boy? And yeah, a quick note for this, between all of his actions throughout the main series, it's pretty safe to assume that Shanks was actually trying to bring the Nika fruit to Ace, the son of the pirate king and his former captain. I mean, the facts are that he stole the fruit from the world government, and with Elbaf as one of his home territories and the giants worshipping the sun god Nika, Shanks very much should have a pretty good idea of the legendary powers that this fruit actually possess. Not to mention that he doesn't even set sail in order to try and find Joy Boy's treasure, the One Piece, until Luffy awakens his Gear 5th. In other words, Shanks is very much aware that this fruit is going to bring big change to the world, and in this world, he just got a little bit screwed over by Zoro getting a little bit hungry. Actually, not so different as to what happened with Luffy, and now he just has to make the best of an awful situation. Lucky for him, he does have one solution. He's best friends with the current world's strongest swordsman, Dracula Mihawk. So maybe he can call in a favor here. So he does exactly that and decides to bring Zoro on a little field trip with him. Luckily, Zoro's parents are nowhere to be found, so getting a permission slip signed is pretty light work for them. And so off they sail, off to a very remote island where, much to Zoro's surprise, the legendary Hawkeye's Mihawk stands waiting for Shanks. After a brief conversation, a lot of yelling, and also some alcohol, the two square off. A sky-splitting battle that leaves the island in ruins, but leaves Zoro completely inspired. He never even knew that people could move so fast, swing with such vicious intent, and be just in general so powerful. And once the match comes to a stalemate, Mihawk walks up to a young Zoro and says a phrase that will etch itself into his very soul. The only person that will ever be strong enough to take my title from me is going to be the king of the pirates himself. Now, off in the corner, Shanks is going crazy and laughing and cheering. Now, admittedly, it did take a lot of work, but he finally got this really stubborn kid to listen. Now, sure, Zoro isn't exactly listening to him, but hey, having been pals with the strongest swordsman helps when you need a world-changing favor here and there, I guess. And after this epic clash of legendary blades in order to set Zoro on the right path, the red-hair pirates, alongside young Zoro, once again set sail back to Shimotsuke village. Finally, after several failed attempts at making this kid care, Zoro asks Shanks' crew how he can become the pirate king because, I mean, he needs to defeat that crazy powerful man. Shanks just laughs and kneels down, giving Zoro his straw hat and saying, all you need to do is find the One Piece before I do. He then picks him up by the shirt, throws him from his ship to the shoreline, and just sails away. And with that, it's official. Sword Peace has begun. And so much has changed in the story, and it's going to just keep getting crazier because of this one change. I mean, for starters, Shanks has 2 arms again. That's pretty neat, I guess, but obviously, and way more importantly, Shanks and Mihawk are way more active players on the high seas in this version of the story. Yes, Zoro and Luffy are pretty similar, but Shanks, the One Piece, and all of that aren't actually his goals. After all, he grew up wanting to be the world's strongest swordsman, and so Mihawk is way more important in our version here. That's why he was necessary to inspire Zoro, because if this little mosshead brat was ever gonna awaken to the Nika form, someone had to put him down the path of Joy Boy. That way, a few years later, when he finally set sail, he's at least aiming for the right goal, somewhat, which, I mean, we're talking about Zoro, it's not gonna be great. But now that he is on that path, he's got to become a pirate as well, and every pirate needs a crew. So let's actually see who's on the menu here. Well, step 1 is gonna be to find a capable navigator, because Lord knows that this dude can not sail the seas without getting lost left and right. And so after setting sail and getting lost immediately in a circle a couple of times even, he comes across a feisty redhead with some anger issues. That's right, I think it is just undeniable. Nami is still going to be part of the story, but not the Nami that you and I know. No, Zoro's story is a story about defeating swordsmen all the way up to the top of the world, and so for this version, I think Oda's original design of Nami with her massive battle axe is a way better fit for Zoro's first crewmate. And since I just mentioned it, yeah, I think One Piece would have one big key difference with Zoro at the helm of the ship. I mean, Luffy wants to be a pirate, and so his story is all about defeating pirates, the government, and being free. Well, Zoro, on the other hand, he wants to be the world's strongest swordsman, so instead of just fighting regular pirates, I think Zoro would just actually end up fighting as many swordsmen as possible and essentially becoming Sword Jesus in the process. Now, what exactly do I mean by that crazy phrase? Well, for one, I don't think that Zoro would form his crew by just finding people he clicks with and then recruiting them that way, the way Luffy does it. No, that really wouldn't work because Zoro doesn't really vibe well with anyone really, except maybe that Coyote from Skypiea and Chopper sometimes, admittedly. No, but for the most part, he's cold, standoffish, and brooding. In a lot of ways, it's what actually makes him so cool to so many people, but much like Mihawk, it's a path that usually would lead to a lot of loneliness and isolation. And so, as a slightly different approach here, I think that Zoro would actually go around defeating anyone with a blade in their hand and form a crew that is all swordsmen, starting with Nami and her axe, and once he learns that she's got beef with Arlong, well, he's obviously next. But not before accidentally inspiring a blonde, rich, and very entitled brat to change his ways as well, because not only is Nami joining the crew in the East Blue, but this time around, after seeing his father defeated at the hands of the Rubber Blade Zoro, Helmeppo would also want to follow our newly appointed Sword Jesus. You thought it was gonna be Sanji, but they also then come up officially with their crew's title, the Straw Sword Pirates, named after the training swords that Zoro used as a child, as well as the straw hat he now wears quite proudly actually. However, after quickly gaining some notoriety in the East Blue, the Straw Sword Pirates are in for it now, because a Marine superstar is officially starting to hunt them down. And that's because on his way to defeat Arlong, Zoro runs into a young man who will one day be the greatest Marine in history, Monkey D. Luffy. What? Are you kidding me? Zoro and Luffy are going to be rivals? Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Without Shanks inspiring Luffy to become a legendary pirate to begin with, Garp would most likely finally have the chance to force Luffy into the Marine lifestyle. Especially if he took Luffy to the island where Shanks and Mihawk completely destroyed everything, causing all sorts of problems there. And so after showing Luffy only bad things being done by pirates, Luffy would adopt his grandfather's goals and set down his path to defeat the up-and-coming pirate, Straw Hat Zoro. Feels really weird saying that, but I'm kind of vibing with it. Now, Luffy is obviously going to be a terror to Zoro. He uses strange abilities to make his fists strong, he seems to be incredibly sharp with his eyes, and he has a commanding presence as well. You see, thanks to his grandfather Garp, Luffy has actually learned the basics of Haki way earlier. And so in his very first matchup with his new rival, Zoro's will to be the strongest is already tested. After all, he cannot let this new Marine punk turn him into the Marines, and so he taps into a power he feels deep down and begins to feel stronger. He's more durable, his senses sharpen, and his will seems to demand respect from those around him as well. Kind of like in the actual story, Zoro unknowingly awakens his latent Haki abilities and is able to subdue Luffy and escape to fight Arlong. And on his way to fight Arlong in classic Zoro fashion, he gets lost. Because of that little mistake, he runs into yet another incredibly annoying clown who seems to recognize his hat. But unlike Luffy, who has fun and battles Buggy with goofy antics and a lot of charm, Zoro just gets to work straight away, and his unlikely trio manages to crush the clown and steal a member of his crew for good measure as well. The acrobat swordsman Kabaji is the next person in line to be unknowingly convinced by the influence of his Nika fruit and ends up following Zoro. But alright, it is Arlong Park time now, and you know the deal. This time around, it's a Zoro versus Arlong blood match, and it's not even close. Having already awakened some of his Haki abilities and formed a crew of cutthroat blade masters, Arlong and his pirates are really nothing. And why not continue the trend of inspiring one of the swordsmen from that crew to join the Straw Sword Pirates as well? Now, it won't be Arlong himself because he's way far too deep into his darkness, but there is one six-armed octopus chef that Zoro could really benefit from. And so, with Nami's help, Zoro finally forms the key group of his pirate crew, with Hachan rounding out the 5 East Blue pirates. Officially now making the 5 main protagonists of Sword Piece Nami, Helmeppo, Kabachi, Hachan, and of course Roronoa Zoro himself. Now from here on out, it's time to find the One Piece obviously and keep building up the crew. Once he reaches the Grand Line, he heads to Alabasta, and since I know you're already wondering, Mr. One is the next crucial recruit of the future Pirate King Zoro. There's absolutely no way he'd go blade to blade against a man of steel, leveling up his strength and then not making it a point to recruit Das Bones. Now after this, he goes on to absolutely stomp on Crocodile, and after giving Robin Crocodile's hook hand so that she can technically be a swordsman as well and join his crew, Zoro learns about the poneglyphs and decides to make his final destination somewhere incredibly important to his past. Zoro learns about the poneglyphs and decides to make his next destination somewhere incredibly important to his personal past: the land of Wano. Now, as you probably realize, this time around, Wano is going to be way more important way earlier in the story, and that's because Zoro learns during his travels that an outrageously powerful dragon beast, Kaido, has enslaved an entire country of powerful swordsmen. Now, does he know the truth behind his swordsman heritage? No, not yet. But after finding out just how important Shanks is, Zoro knows that he's got to take down a Yonko and find the poneglyphs very quickly. Now, it's not like he's going to liberate Wano like that immediately, you know, that would be kind of insane to expect, but he does set his sight on it as a really big milestone from here on out. But before the crew can make their way to the swordsman paradise, Hachan decided to mention a couple of pirates that he's been hearing rumors about, two swordsmen who he believes will be absolutely necessary to conquer the seas. One is a chilling skeleton that roams the Florian Triangle, and a man known only as the Surgeon of Death, but you all know him way better as the legendary Trafalgar Law. And so with Wano as his big next target, Zoro needs to make a couple of really important pit stops. Now, Brook for one is pretty easy. After all, Zoro just sort of needs to show up and ask him to join. It's not until he comes way deeper into the Grand Line and finally runs into the Heart Pirates that things actually get really wild. After going to several islands that he didn't intend to on accident again, even with Nami, Zoro and his Straw Sword Pirates finally land at Sabaody Archipelago. Now, this island is going to lead to several massive changes for Zoro and his crew, because immediately after landing on the island, the crew meets the Dark King Rayleigh, an infamous swordmaster and right hand of the former Pirate King. That's right, just how we did with Luffy, Shanks might have called in another favor, asking Rayleigh to check in on Zoro when he made it to the halfway point of the Grand Line. After all, this kid, even with his great strength and skill, is missing one key thing to really unlock his powers, and it's up to Rayleigh to teach Zoro this very hidden ability. Once they meet and start chatting, Rayleigh asks him if he wants to know the truth about the world, and Zoro is just all in for it. In his mind, whatever it takes to become Pirate King and take down Mihawk, he will just do it. And so, in a complete 180-degree turn from what Luffy and the Straw Hats do at Sabaody, Zoro just straight up learns the truth about Joy Boy. And that means he also learns the true nature of his powers. Now, he's obviously not told everything, and honestly, that would be fatal to his personal growth, but he does learn about the thing that he's been missing, the part of his character that's been preventing him from tapping into the unlimited powers of the Sun God. Long story short, this dude needs to learn how to crack a smile. Now, the Straw Sword crew is absolutely baffled, and Zoro is probably gonna be furious. He needs to let loose and have fun. How on earth is that going to change anything? Like, what a joke this old man is, but despite his goofy words, Rayleigh's face is actually dead serious. Zoro is absolutely shocked and confused by this fact and walks away very frustrated, and while some of his crew go to follow him, Rayleigh grabs Hachan and Brook, pulling them aside for a private little discussion that's gonna be important for later. Now, while Zoro goes off to reflect on things and on how to be a more open person, I guess, he gets lost and accidentally finds the doctor that he's been desperately needing, Trafalgar Law. The problem is, Zoro is not great with words, but more importantly, Law is honestly way too smart to be convinced or deceived into joining his crew. And so it's gonna be up to Zoro's actions to speak louder than words. He challenges him to a battle and puts his own honor on the line. And so the time has come. The Straw Hat swordsman Roronoa Zoro is about to face off against his greatest opponent yet, Trafalgar D. Water Law. And so the two clash in an epic sword battle. Using his room ability to dominate the battlefield, Law takes the lead pretty pretty early on in the fight, but thankfully, Zoro has a really smart ace up his sleeve. You see, Zoro is forced to rely on his rubber powers in a way that he's really never had to before. Since these powers are something that he rarely ever taps into, using them normally catches any opponent off guard, and while it did work to land some really clean hits on Law, his Ope Ope no Mi powers do seem way more powerful. And it's in this moment, I think, that Zoro would realize that just because a fighter uses their devil fruit doesn't really mean it takes away from their skills with a sword. It actually enhances it. And right now he's on the back foot here because with his stubborn attitude, he has refused to engage with his silly powers. Law, on the other hand, has perfectly blended his powers and his swordsmanship, and it's probably going to be the end of Zoro if he doesn't change anything. He's beaten down, cut, slammed with rocks, and teleported around the battlefield, losing stamina real fast. He needs to think of something quick here to turn things around. But just in that moment, Rayleigh's secret plan unfolds. He yells out, "What did I tell you, Roronoa? If you're gonna die here, you might as well die having some fun, no?" And, well, I guess he's right. And suddenly, Hachan walks out of the bar with 6 drums, and Brook pulls out his violin, and they unleash a killer song, but something about the drums, something deep down in Zoro's gut is burning. It's burning hot! Now Rayleigh smiles a killer grin as Zoro seems to pick up speed. He's fighting more loosely. He's fighting more strong. He's fighting with a smile. That's right, he has thrown caution and pride to the wind, and he just doesn't care anymore. He honestly looks like a man possessed, and it's almost freaky. Law is now suddenly on his heels, and Zoro's hair is flickering, turning whitish as he feels his room starting to bend and warp around him. And all of a sudden, Zoro's body is now also moving and bending in all sorts of weird ways, and he's gaining extra momentum and weird angles on his sword strikes. He's laughing and now bouncing around the battlefield like a literal maniac. At this point, he's no longer Roronoa Zoro, the master swordsman. He's now stepped into the realm of the divine and become Sun God Zoro. Letting loose an intense and sickening laugh, Zoro stomps the ground and it ties up around Law with a rubbery death grip. He screams out the name of his final move as several arms and heads seem to goofily explode from his body. Zoro comes in with a new ultimate move, something that just seemed to swell from within his heartbeat. Shouting the name of his final attack, Ashura, Blade of Amaterasu, Zoro extends his swords like they were made of rubber, catching them on fire by swinging them so fast, but he chooses to stop right before they slice off Law's head. And with that, Law is of course left with no other choice but to admit defeat. He drops his sword, tears streaming down his eyes, knowing that he's lost the chance to avenge Corazon and take down Doflamingo, but just then, Zoro rests his hand on his shoulder and with a small grin, he powers down back to his regular form. He promises Law that to accomplish his goal, he's gonna need to take down even fiercer pirates like the warlords, the emperors, and yes, also eventually Dracul Mihawk. Hearing that, Law then asks if the crew selfishly can cut down Doflamingo with him, promising that there's a path straight to Kaido and Wano from Dressrosa. Zoro and the rest of the crew agree, and the Heart Pirates are officially absorbed into the Straw Sword Pirates as well. But of course, everything isn't all that well and good, because just then, a fleet of marine ships starts surrounding the island that they're battling on. Just then, 3 marines with lightning speed rush onto the island. Commodore Smoker, Captain Monkey D. Luffy, and Marine Admiral Kizaru. Something tells me the journey to defeat Kaido could fall short right this moment, with Rayleigh battling Kizaru, Law barely healed forced to fight Smoker, and a weakened Zoro needing to battle Luffy. The Straw Sword Pirates are going to need a true miracle to make it out of this one alive. And even if they do, they still have to defeat Doflamingo, Kaido, and a whole slew of other powerful swordsmen like King, Shiryu, and even Red Hair Shanks before they can finally find the One Piece and Zoro can finally battle Dracul Mihawk for the title of the world's strongest swordsman. In other words, the path ahead is brutal, but if there's anyone who can handle it, it's Roronoa Zoro. And since we are talking about him taking on Luffy's role in the series, I do wonder what might happen if Zoro also fought every opponent that Luffy needed to face in the series as well. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's a video that it's exactly that. What a coincidence. Now, why not give it a watch and see just what type of insanity unfolds in that video. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching as always. Really appreciate it. And yeah, if you enjoyed this one, let me know in the comments and I'll see you in the next one.